All right, Bruchim Abayim, welcome everyone. We're going to continue the Dvar Torah that we were learning before from Rabbeinu Nachman ben Fega ben Breslov, Likutei Moharan, Siman Samech Daled 64. Please watch the first video before you watch this one. We're just dividing this into different shorter videos, particularly if I get a phone call in the middle or something, or on the way I was on the way to work. So just keeping it real here. So we were discussing two types of heresy. Rabbi Nachman says, that the first type of heresy is called, it comes from the Shviras HaKelim, comes from the broken vessels. So therefore its root is in holiness. So even though we have to stay far away from such heresies, those types of heresies are easy to find God within them and to repent from. And he said, like, the examples of those heresies are other religions, witchcraft, and different types of studies and sciences, as opposed to the second type of heresy that comes from studying Jewish texts without fear of God, that leads a person to think that he's found this great wisdom, like my Baba Allah Shalom, she would say the Mazel from Columbus, right? Like you discovered America, but you really didn't discover anything. There's a tzaddik in Scranton, Pennsylvania, Rabbi Avram Goldstein. He's a Ger Tzedek, and he's a big tzaddik. He's a shtikler Rebbe, and Rabbi Avram soll gesund sein. He told me once, sometimes they ask him, because he speaks Yiddish, and they bring him to give chizik to Bochrim. So I'll say, a Bocher, a Satmar Bocher, will say he doesn't believe in God. And he's like, wow, I'm so impressed. Here I am. You, a 14-year-old kid, you know better than the Rambam, right? You discovered something the Rambam couldn't think of, Obviously, he's making fun of this type of ideology, but it's that type of a thing that people think they're so smart when they're really not that smart. And he said this type of Rabbeinu Nachman says, Rabbeinu Nachman ben Fega says that this means this type of heresy. The first type of heresy, he says, apikorsis, comes from the Shviras HaKelim, comes from the broken vessels. So it's rooted in holiness, and God is very obvious there, right? Because all these other religions, they all talk about God, right? Even like we see, again, I don't want to give any attention, chas v'sholom, to the Avodah Zarah. I don't understand. There's certain Yigalite that they mean well, but they're being mefarsim of Avodah Zarah and Kishuf and other things that are also, even if Me'ikar Adin, it's not Kishuf, it's not Avodah Zarah, whatever it is, we're not supposed to be playing around with that stuff, right? And because it's hurting me, that unfortunately a Ingerman, a very choshev Ingerman, a big neshama, fell into the klippas, fell into that first type of apikorsis, where it's very easy to get out of it. So, and we have to be makar of him and daven that you should come back to Yishkai, that you get mad and finish the whole shas. It's very, very upsetting that someone doesn't see the Or HaTorah after they finish the whole shas and the whole Zohar Kodesh and everything, that they could go back to Avodah Zarah. It's very, very hurtful, and it's a big chil Hashem. But to his credit, he was trying not to make a chil Hashem. But these other Yingalite, want to be mefarsim it for some reason, and they're making it a chil Hashem. But anyway, Mimon Shach, that type of apikorsis, as much as we have to stay away from it, sof kol sof, that one for Darbaner, he says he believes there's one Borei Olam. He's moide that there's a Borei Olam, right? So it's just as reingefallen in the klippas. but it's the klipas that come from the tzaitzis the kedusha, from moisris the kedusha, as opposed to the second type of apikorsis, says Rabbeinu, comes from the cholol aponoi, comes from the empty space, where godliness is not so obvious. Even though godliness is there, it's not so obvious. So it's very much harder to do tshuva from that type of apikorsis. But even though it's much more difficult, it's not impossible. And that's what Rabbeinu is going to be megala here in a very deep way. So the second type of heresy that comes from the empty space, that could be a person who learned and thinks he like that's the thing. The other Ingerman, he doesn't think that he is saying Yiddishkeit. He thinks that he grabbed onto this Avodah Zarah. But you have some people, they become big chokrim and big maskilim, and they think and they could come to atheism out of the Gemara, Rahman al-Islam, and we saw such things, from Pilpulim and things that, the story that my Rav tells over that he heard, growing up, learning in Torah Das, that, there could be, and this is a Rav who learned in Litvish yeshivas, but he said, back in Lita, you could find someone sitting over a Gemara smoking a cigarette on Shabbos. And then they'll ask, and the Talmud Chacham will see that, and the Ehrlich Yid will see that, and say, "What are you doing?" And then he says, "Was meint man? Dash is good, and dash is good. The cigarette is good, and the Gemara is good." And that's from the Chalal Panoi. That doesn't come from the Shviras HaKelim. And so it says, all who go there don't come back. There was a German, actually here from Square, passing by Square. I'm not in Square right now, I'm in Palisades. But his father was an interesting character. He was also like a shtikler Rebbe, but either a Baal Tshuva or a Ger, or maybe he was never Begayer at all, some people say. But he was a Rebbe with Hasidim, and he was a big Parish. He was a big Parish. And he was a big tzaddik, and he was nifter, and then his son went to Skver, and he learned there, and he was a big Skver chassid, and then he became an apikoros. He once wrote to me before he left, and I feel a big charata that I didn't be makar of him more. But he wrote a book, and it was this pasuk called Lo'ela Yeshuva, and all who go there don't come back. I don't remember how he called it, but it's this pasuk. And I don't know where he's holding now, but that was, Anyway, Miman Shachts doesn't matter. I don't know if his apikorsis where it came from. I don't know if it came from the Shviras HaKelim or the Chalal Panoi, because I didn't know him well enough. But the one thing, it seems like a shtickle Shviras HaKelim because his father was such a big tzaddik. But I learned from that like, people, they give me a hard time. Those other people, they give me a hard time. Why do you go to the movies? Like last night, I mentioned the first video. I brought my son to the movies, Motzei Shabbos. It was well after this month. We left. My wife and I and my son went to the movies. And I realized, because if I'm too frum, it's hard enough to raise kids frum these days. But if I'm too frum, like, I'm gonna just turn them off. So after like Rabbi Nachman said, to get into a little bit of narishkeit, and find the kedusha there also, and that's also come from Shviras HaKelim, whatever it is, but it's not mamash apikorsis, So anyway, I have to make a phone call. Pause this. There's a funny thing I shouldn't talk about why that's what I have to do for work. I don't know if I have to do it, but it's what I do. Sunday I remind them to play the videos for other religions at work, and because I run the TV station in the prison to all the different religions. That comes from the Shviras HaKelim. But I remember there was one of the Galochim from that religion. It was Yontiv, Sunday last year. This is the beginning of this year on the Hebrew calendar. Yom Tovim or Shabbos Sunday. So I asked the Galach, who's a deacon, if he would call the prison that they should play, and he was like, the thing was, he doesn't have a cell phone. That's a big thing. He doesn't have a cell phone. It's a big patch and pun to us, like the story with the Baal Shem Tov and Kodesh. But anyway, he was so annoyed. Like, first he said he'd do it. I said, well, I could ask someone else to do it. He said, no, he'll do it. Now he said he won't do it anymore. It's his own religion. And he's like, they don't even watch it. Like the other religions, they watch it, but it's his own religion. He doesn't care. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's just a funny story from work. But Kain Shum Tshuva al Apikorsis. So there's no answer to that second type of heresy. So I had to call control before I lost control. No, before I lost reception. So anyway, since this second type of heresy comes from the empty space, there's no answer to it, because over there, God's presence is so constricted that in the archetype of this universe, it seems as if to say such a thing, even though we say lav kapshuto, but it's so hidden, and so therefore you can't give answers to that type of heresy. But the Jewish people, says Rabbeinu Nachman ben Fegas Chosei Galenu, that through our emunah, through our faith, we're over it. We pass over all the wisdoms, even the second type of heresy that comes from the empty space, because we believe in God without any philosophy, without any second thoughts, without any wisdom, just with pure, simple faith, and perfect faith, because God fills all the worlds and surrounds all the worlds. And we find that He is, so to speak, inside the worlds, and He's around all the worlds, and there needs to be a separation. If there was such a thing, there is no such thing, right? Really, God is totally one, and there's no difference between His filling the worlds and surrounding the worlds. But again, within the archetype of the structure of creation, how it exists, there is this illusion, like what Einstein called the optical delusion, right? Between the Miloi and the Sibuv, between the filling the worlds and the surrounding the worlds. And if not, then everything would be one. And so there would be no empty space. And so there would be no place that God withdrew His godliness, so to speak. And so He had to withdraw the space, whatever it means, even if it's an archetype, even if it doesn't mean literally, but it means archetypically, in order to have the empty space, to create the world, so we can have free will and not be blinded by the light of the endless light of God. And we find that the empty space fills this world, surrounds this world, meaning that there's the tzimtzum, there's the halal, there's the Ein Sof, there's the tzimtzum, there's the halal, and within the halal, within the empty space, is the universe, is all the creation, even all the oilamas, from Atzilus down to Malchus, to Malchus Malchus, exists within the Chalal HaPanoi. It exists within the empty space. And so the empty space surrounds the creation. And God, who surrounds all the worlds, surrounds the empty space. And therefore, you could say that God fills all the worlds, meaning He fills the creation that was created within the empty space, and He surrounds all the worlds because He surrounds the empty space. But there is that separation that is the empty space between the surrounding all worlds and the filling all worlds, so to speak. That's where the godliness was withdrawn. That's where the tzimtzum exists, in the empty space that surrounds the creation, again, in an archetypical sense. It doesn't mean literally from the Hasidic standpoint. From the standpoint of the Vilna Gaon, it does mean literally. But from the Hasidic standpoint, God is still there in the Chalal HaPanoi. He's still there in the empty space. It's just, he's hidden from there. But the thing is, within creation, there is the revelation of godliness within the creation that doesn't exist in the Chalal, that doesn't exist in the empty space. Meaning God is there, but the revelation is totally empty there. There's no revelation. It's totally hidden unless you really know where to look. Whereas in the world that we are in, we can very easily look at, the beauties of creation and recognize godliness within this. So that's kind of the concept of it fills all the worlds, right? But again, we're talking about the empty space. So through faith that we believe in, that God fills all the worlds and surrounds all the worlds, and after, since he surrounds all the worlds, therefore the empty space also comes from God's wisdom. And so for sure the actual truth is that godliness is there in the empty space. Only it's impossible to understand this and to find God there because he's so hidden, even though he's there, as we said above. And therefore, if you pass over all the wisdoms and all the questions and you just have simple faith and you're not questioning whether God is there or not, you're just recognizing that he's there even though you don't see God there. So therefore, you pass over all the wisdoms, all the questions, and all of the heresies that come from there, from the empty space, because you know that it's impossible to find an answer there, but you don't need an answer. We just know from faith. That's where blind faith comes in, and literally blind, because God hid himself so much in the empty space. Because we know by faith that it's impossible to answer those questions. Because if you would find an answer to those questions, then you'd find God there. And then the space wouldn't be empty, and then there would be no space for the world to exist. So therefore, the real truth is, there are actually answers. And godliness is there in the empty space. But because of the philosophizing, they get drowned in there, they get mired in there, and it's impossible to find God there because it's the concept of the empty space, the archetype of the empty space. So therefore, we just have to believe that God surrounds the empty space, and then the truth is, of course, God is definitely there. And therefore the Jewish people, that's why the Jewish people are called Ivrim, Hebrews. Why? Because they're Ovrim, they're passing over with their faith all the wisdoms. Even the wisdom that's not truly wisdom. Meaning the second type of heresy that comes from the empty space, as we said above. And therefore, that's why God is called the God of the Hebrews in Exodus 3. It means like from the other side of the river, from passing over the river in Joshua 24:3, meaning from the sides. Meaning that godliness surrounds even the empty space that comes from the constriction that God withdrew his light to the sides. And that's why the Jews are called Hebrews, because of their faith. That through their faith, that they believe in the God of the Hebrews, that they believe God is there on the sidelines, like we said above. And then they're passing over these wisdoms that are not truly wisdoms, which is the second type of heresy that we said above. And therefore, for sure, from this second type of heresy, we have to be even more careful to run away from it, and we shouldn't look into their words at all, because if, God forbid, someone gets drowned there, That's the type of heresy that it says all those who go, not all those who go there come back. All right, we'll stop here and we'll make it a separate video from there, just to make it a little bit easier. All right, thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe, comment, hit the bell button, and watch the next video. All right, we love you.